Alright, so here's the deal. For this part, I need you to get these words. Now, I don't know of an easier way to do this other than just to give you these definitions, but I'm going to try my best to make it as interesting as possible. So make sure that on this sheet you have these definitions down and that you understand them. If at any point you do not understand one of these definitions, please pause the video, come up, and talk to me about it. Also, another thing that I want you to understand is if I am talking too fast and you miss a definition, the beauty of the video is you can pause it and you can write it down and then you can play it again. Does that make sense? So pause the video where you need to. So here we go. The first definition is photosynthesis, boy. So photosynthesis, we just kind of talked about, which we talked about in the food producers lab, which we just did, is when there is light. So in the presence of light, plants use carbon dioxide and water to make food and oxygen. So plants do this by taking sunlight into their chloroplasts, hits the chlorophyll, and it makes their food. Carbohydrates are things that are chemicals used for building blocks and energy. So the examples of these two chemicals are sugars and starches. Many runners like to eat starch in the form of pasta the night before they run, which helps them have explosive energy the next morning. Okay, so the next few words go along with trophic levels. Some of these words are going to be review, some of them are new. So here we go. An autotroph are organisms that can make their own food. So these would be all of the plants. A heterotroph are organisms that must hunt or find their food, and the example I have are animals. Trophic levels are groups of organisms based on how they get food, and there are three main trophic levels. They are producers, consumers, and decomposers. And if you remember back to when we did food webs, we used these words, producers, consumers, and decomposers. Energy is the ability to do work. Oh, sorry. Here it is again. The ability to do work, to get things done. Oh, there it is again. To do work, to get things done. Sorry, I'm done now. So here's some new vocabulary. Biomass. Biomass is the total organic matter or living stuff in an ecosystem. So if you looked outside this classroom window, anything living out there would be considered biomass. Some ecosystems have a lot of biomass. Some ecosystems don't have as much biomass, but biomass is any of the living things in an ecosystem. Producers, you should know this, are organisms that make their food through the process of photosynthesis, and these are all plants. Consumers are organisms that eat other organisms, and there are three kinds. Herbivores eat only plants, carnivores eat only meat, and omnivores eat both plants and meat. Decomposers are organisms that eat the remains of dead organisms, and there's two examples, bacteria and fungi. I'm a fungi, get it? Whatever. Also, it's important for you to understand that decomposers are always usually microscopic, which means you need a microscope to see them. Detritus is dead organic matter. So this could be dead leaves, this could be dead animals, anything like that. A detritivore are organisms that eat the dead organic matter. And it's important for you to understand that these are things that are macroscopic. So some examples are earthworms, vultures, and maggots. So this means you can see them with your eye and you do not need a microscope. Okay, So you should get all the words on your study guide. I want you to go down to the next part, which is an energy pyramid. And we're going to talk about the energy pyramid, and we're going to talk about the rule of 10%. I want you to understand that scientists usually use the energy pyramid to visually show the idea of biomass on the energy pyramid. So this is an energy pyramid, and you have one like on your page there. I want you to fill this out with the labels that I am going to give you. So the bottom level is always the producer trophic level. There should be, in a good ecosystem, a ton of producers. Now, if you remember what the word producer means, that's plants. So for an ecosystem to thrive, to survive, it needs more plants than anything else. And if you look outside, there is one main plant that is usually everywhere here, and that would be grass. Okay? The next level are the primary consumer trophic levels. So the primary consumers, if you remember way back when we talked about food web, eat the producers. And if you look at the arrow shows flow of energy. Producers' energy is going up to the primary consumers. The level above primary consumer is secondary consumer. And at the top, we have tertiary consumer. Now, if you notice, the pyramid gets smaller. I need you to understand, in a healthy ecosystem, they do not have the same amount of biomass. Because if you look down at the producer level, it's larger. If you look up at the tertiary consumer level, it's smaller. So that means that as you move up, there should be less of the organisms that eat everything, which is tertiary, and more of the producers, which are the plants at the bottom. Now, each one of these levels is connected to the side of the pyramid. And this is the decomposer trophic level. And what that's showing you is each one of these things die, the decomposer will break them down. Okay? So remember, producers are always at the bottom and have the biggest trophic level. Because, there's your question at the top, if they were not there and they did not have the biggest trophic level, the producers wouldn't support the whole ecosystem. Okay, so what's the rule of 10%? The rule of 10% is only 10% of the food energy consumed at one trophic level is available as food for the next trophic level. Now, this is hard to understand, so I'm going to try and show you it visually on a pyramid. So I took these organisms from Mono Lake, which was that lake, that salt lake we studied a while ago. So if you notice at the bottom, there's planktonic algae as the producer. Planktonic algae are eaten by a primary consumer called the brine shrimp. The brine shrimp are eaten by a secondary consumer called the California gull. And the California gull is eaten by a tertiary consumer, the coyote. Now, if I started, if you notice in the bottom corner, with 100 kilograms of planktonic algae biomass, so let's just say I had 100 algae, which isn't a lot, but let's just say I did for argument's sake, okay? 10% of that algae that the brine shrimp eats would be available for energy in the brine shrimp. So that would mean 10% of 100 is 10. And if you notice, to go up, I just drop a 0 off the end, okay? So the California gull would get 10% of the energy of the brine shrimp. So that would be 1 kilogram. And the coyote would get 10% of the California gull when I ate it, which is 0.1 gram. So here's what I want you to understand about this. If you are a coyote, you need to eat more California gulls because you are only getting about 0.1% energy level from that California gull. This is why larger organisms usually need to eat more to survive. So think about you. You would need to eat a lot more food than, let's say, a brine shrimp in order to get the same energy. Because if the brine shrimp ate the same amount of food that you did in a day, they would be super fat. They'd explode. Okay? So this is how energy moves up. The other 90% of the energy, because if you look at between the planktonic algae and the brine shrimp, there's 90 kilograms gone when that brine shrimp eats the algae. that is used for the algae. The algae uses that energy to survive. So for example, it's used in photosynthesis, it's used to respirate, it's used to do all the other things. So the moral of the story is the next level up when it eats something only gets 10% of the energy. Let me give you a different example. Well, first of all, would this be possible with a rule of 10%? No, the answer is no, because number one, it doesn't show 10%, and number two, if it was like this, your pyramid would now become a square, okay? So try this. If I had 1,000 kilograms of brine shrimp, based on the rule of 10%, the algae would be 10,000 because I have to go backwards. The California gull would be 100, and the coyote would be 10. So you do 10%. Again, when you go up, you drop a zero off. You move the decimal point one place to the left. When you go down, you move one place to the right. Try this one. If I had 7,000 kilograms of California gull, I'd have 70,000 kilograms of brine shrimp, I'd have 700,000 kilograms of algae, and if I went up, I just drop a zero off, I'd have 700 kilograms of energy in the coyote. Now, scientists use the energy pyramid for 3 different ways. If I were you, I'd jot this down below your pyramid. Number one, the levels visually get smaller because if you think about each level, there has to be more plants than anything else. So as you go up, there's usually less. Number two, it shows that the decomposer breaks everything down because the decomposer is on the side. And number three, it shows that as you move up, the grams of energy decrease. So next step, I want you to think about everything you did. If you have questions, you are going to see me. If you think you are good, you are going to see me for a dun 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 quiz, baby. Good luck.